There's something you guys don't know about me that I need to tell you about. I am multiple, which means that I have multiple personalities. Now hear me out. If you've ever heard of multiple personality disorder, which is now dissociative identity disorder, or DID, I seem to meet all the criteria. However, it's quite possible that I could have something called other specified dissociative disorder, type 1B, which is very similar to DID. WebMD has an accurate and easy to understand description of DID, which I'm going to read. It can explain it a lot better than I can. Dissociative identity disorder is a severe form of dissociation, a mental process which produces a lack of connection in a person's thoughts, memories, feelings, actions, or sense of identity. Dissociative identity disorder is thought to stem from a combination of factors that may include trauma experienced by the person with the disorder. The dissociative aspect is thought to be a coping mechanism. The person literally shuts off or dissociates themselves from a situation or experience that's too violent, traumatic, or painful to assimilate with their conscious self. So that was from WebMD. A couple other things. DID is often caused by repeated childhood trauma, which happens before the personality has the chance to become consolidated as one personality. And this is how different personalities or alters are created. Now you might be asking, Alyssa, how do you know if you really have dissociative identity disorder? First of all, that's my business. Second, I'm going to give you an answer actually. My answer to that is I have examined my experiences very critically and very carefully over a long period of time of about 12 years. Researching various different mental health conditions and ruling out others as possibilities while trying to find the most accurate name for my experience because it was causing issues for me and I wanted to figure out what it was. I do have other diagnoses like autism, PTSD, and OCD, and they do overlap in some ways, but the alters or the personalities that I developed are very specifically a DID thing, so I know it's not my autism or anything else. I should mention that I do not have a diagnosis of DID or OSDD, but similar to how I believe that self-diagnosis in the autistic community is valid, I think self-diagnosis for DID or OSDD is also valid. Psychologists may be quote-unquote experts, but the best expert on you is you. DID can be tricky to recognize in oneself, and I'll explain why later, but self-discovery of possible DID can and does happen like it did with me. DID is not a disorder I would casually self-diagnose, so it's not only super complex, but it's also extremely stigmatized. And why would I want one of the most stigmatized disorders in existence? The important thing for me is that now I have a name for what I'm dealing with, and a way to search for resources that can help me function better. Also, if I'm unable to get a diagnosis of DID due to a lack of resources, or if it turns out I don't have DID after all, I will still say that I am multiple. The reason is because there are many different types of multiplicity, not just DID or OSDD systems, and I could be a different type of multiple. By the way, a system is a collection of alters or headmates within one person or body. This is a term that can apply to people with DID, OSDD, and other types of multiplicity. I am not an expert on the multiple community outside of DID and OSDD, so if you want to read about other types of multiplicity, I included a link in the description. Please check that out. I believe that the other types of multiplicity that are not DID or OSDD are just as valid, since I am very much aligned with the neurodiversity movement. I'm a skeptical person by nature, but I would rather validate others and be inclusive of their identities instead of gatekeeping and deciding who is a true multiple and who is not. So I thought I should at least mention in my video that DID and OSDD systems are not the only valid ones. They are just the type that I relate to best. Now, back to my multiplicity. What are some specific clues that gave me the idea that I could possibly have DID? DID is a very sneaky disorder due to amnesiac barriers between alters, or like different memories. We each have different memories of our past, and a poor memory overall. So this is one reason why it took me so long to realize that DID is likely what I'm dealing with. Looking back, I have had alters noticeably emerge since I was a teenager, doing things like leaving notes that I wouldn't remember writing, or writing in my journal in a very different tone compared to what I thought my personality was like. Other people would also tell me that my behavior and speech patterns were quite variable, and I would think that I was possessed by a demon when my voice and demeanor would suddenly change. I would feel like a different person. I also had moments when I would revert to a childlike state. And I even had a crush on one of my alters without realizing that it was an alter. I thought it was just an imaginary friend. If you have seen my documentary and some of my content with me talking about my fictional world Vale, that was actually Seamus. Seamus is an alter. So I had either at the time forgotten about these experiences or written them off as a cringy teenage phase, but ultimately they never went away. In other words, they were not a phase. I had always acted inconsistent. My demeanor, my preferences were changing rapidly in such dramatic ways that I sometimes didn't know who I was, or felt like I was just faking or lying to people. And I know that sense of faking or lying to people can also come with autism or like ADHD, sort of imposter syndrome. But for me, this was very much heightened. I'm like, why can't I be consistent? It didn't make sense to me that I could easily be really shy and sweet and innocent one day, and another day I'm bold and brash and kind of crude. Some days I'd say, I love video games. Other days I'd say, I'm not really a gamer. Some days I'd feel masculine. Other days I'd feel feminine. Sometimes I'd feel somewhere in between. Alters can have different genders. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I'm just startled because I look unfamiliar or strange. Each alter has different patterns of speech and the way that they type messages, at least each of my alters. Each system's different. Some alters seem very, very similar, and some are supposed to be very covert, while others are more overt and more obviously different from each other. Mine, they can be both. They can be covert and overt, but they definitely each have different patterns of speech, different ways they type messages. So I wanted to mention that part because you might notice my voice changing, especially if you watch my live streams, my gaming streams lately, my voice changes a lot. That's why. They also have different preferences, like favorite colors and foods and favorite TV shows and video games and hobbies. They also have different ways of relating to the world, so different approaches to certain situations. Some are more extroverted, some are more introverted, some are in between. They might have different opinions on certain things, different religious beliefs even. Most of mine either do not have religious beliefs, are agnostic or atheist, and one of them is spiritual. It's all very interesting, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around it, even though it's been under my nose this whole time. Also, I noticed that my abilities would change drastically. One of my alters has a talent for making teeny tiny paper flowers, while another one has such poor motor skills that I can't even trust them to hold a knife or glass dishes or, write with a pen without it looking horrible. Some of my alters can sing, some of them cannot. Same with drawing. Some are great with typing, while others prefer writing on paper or speaking verbally. Some are asexual, some are hypersexual, some don't even register sexuality as a thing that exists. So I realized that there is a lot of stigma around dissociative identity disorder, like I mentioned, and that by being open about being multiple, I'm taking a risk. But to me, that risk is worth it, because I don't want to hide myself away to make other people comfortable. I am done with that crap. I am sorry. Or sorry, not sorry. So the reason I'm telling you about this is because I'm going to start allowing my alters to be themselves in my videos whenever possible. Within reason, you know, they gotta still be polite like most people. Because it's utterly exhausting trying to mask or hide them. It's similar to how it's exhausting to mask autistic traits when you naturally want to stim and be yourself. I am open to any questions you might have about my multiplicity. I may not talk about it extensively though, especially regarding trauma, because I don't want to accidentally trigger alters out or cause them to have flashbacks. Questions about my alters as people, how to tell who is who, those things are much easier to answer. My alters would likely appreciate it and feel seen. Whenever a specific alter is talking or aware of what's going on, most prominently, that means that alter is fronting. Fronting is a term basically to say that this is the personality that is like currently active. Whoever fronts most often depends on who I'm talking to, what we're talking about, activities we're doing, my mood, and the state of my body and mind. Also, from now on, please call me Lushia. Alyssa is the name of only one of my alters, while Lushia is the name of my system as a whole. It's just more comfortable and all of my alters respond to it. You don't have to memorize the names of each of my alters or things about them, though sometimes they do like being recognized. Also, I do have some alters with different genders, but you can use she, her pronouns regardless of who's fronting. None of us really mind. Also, if you've noticed, I'm sometimes using words like we and us. I'm talking about me. It's like talking about myself as a group. For more information on my system, please watch the video linked in the description or somewhere on my screen. I really appreciate you guys listening, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.